links up to your bank, that hooks you into your digital wallet, that's topped up with government-issued digital currency. So call it Fed coin or the new euro, whatever it'll be a digital currency issued by a central bank. And like we were talking about earlier, maybe the government will issue ration supplies. So they'll top up your digital wallet every month. They'll give you an allowance, food and for shelter, and for whatever else they give you the allowance. And in order to keep the people happy, they'll keep topping up that amount with a larger and larger sum each month. So they need people using the digital currency. The only way you can make a digital currency succeed, as we've learned in the crypto world, is through participation. So how does the government force people or coerce people to using a digital currency? Well, you issue it to buy food, for instance. Everybody needs to eat. And if you need to go to that army supply point to buy your rations of food, and you can only pay for it with your government-issued digital currency, well, then they've got you. You're going to switch over to using their currency. And if they say to you, the only way you can pay your taxes is through the government-issued digital currency, then you're going to be forced to switch over to using their new currency.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output. But very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series.
Yeah, let me add, we're going to go into clown world here. I'm going to use Austin, Texas as an example. It's a perfect one. And in many places across the states are following the same. So through the news feed, they've been releasing a lot of criminals. They first started in New Jersey and New York because they didn't want all these prisoners to be together in the cells, close quarters. If you weren't a violent offender, they let you out and come back later and finish your sentence or whatever. So they let all these criminals out, and the police are not responding to burglaries or fraud or drug-related offenses or anything like this anymore. So it's like, we got other more important things to do, those petty crimes, prostitution. You can do what you want over there. Now, here's the thing in Austin, Texas, though. If you're outside breaking quarantine, they want to arrest you because you're breaking quarantine. But wait, you just let all the criminals out because you didn't want them to be in close quarters, but you're going to arrest people who want to go out for a stroll in the park and be away from everybody in the fresh air. It's nothing more than a Pavlov dog experiment to control and get people used to. It's more like a retraining exercise for people than anything for me about real quarantine. Because how do you threaten to arrest people who are breaking quarantine when you just let all the criminals out of the prison because it was going to be too close quarters? Like, you can't have both messages going at the same time.
But you're talking logically, and this whole system that they're implementing of control and lockdown, it's not logic, it's emotional. People are scared, people are worried, people are anxious, and so they turn to their government for help and for comfort and for calming words. And so we're talking emotional decisions. We're not talking logical decisions. So long as the government can keep pacifying the people, then strange things can happen that are not quite logical, and people won't question it too much. They might notice it. They might have some level of cognitive dissonance. But in the end, emotional decisions override logical decisions for many people. And so that's how government can maintain. They need the media to buy into what the government's telling them. And they can spin a story to explain things. The important thing is whether or not the government keeps up that level of fear and panic, and for the people asking the government to keep saving them and helping them. So long as that continues, then the army can get away with doing all sorts of things. What's been happening the last couple of weeks should not stand up to a constitution, should not meet that test. I think all sorts of violations are happening, and they're justifying it based on we're at war with the global pandemic.
Yeah, I saw Gordon Brown, the Guardian article, saying that we need to come together with a temporary global government and let the United Nations and the World Health Organization oversee and have jurisdiction over sovereign rights on countries just temporarily to form a global government for this pandemic release and fighting here. Just a temporary global government. You have to kowtow to these higher powers of the United Nations, and they'll tell you what to do. But then after the pandemic's over, then we can just magically go back to our world the way it was with sovereign nations. But then I saw like a pulse. You can't keep humans perpetually in fear. You need to let off the fear, get some hope, and then strike the fear, and then bring off the hope, and then put back the fear again. Lockdown lets you up. Oh, we need to lock it down again. So if they're going to say that we're going to come into a temporary global government headed by the United Nations, once in and installed, never uninstalled.
It's draconian, and we're seeing who stands on which side of the fence. And Gordon Brown has just revealed his true colors. People often suspected it because when he ran the UK, he sold country's gold at an all-time low. The nickname of being it was Brown's bottom. That's when he sold the nation's gold. He sold off the wealth, terrible prices. So now we see him standing up for the New World Order. All these old conspiracy theories are now surfacing, and we're seeing who's pushing them. So we had Gordon Brown in the UK. We had, was it Nancy Pelosi the other day, wanting to have a form of digital currency. They're trying to push the agenda of a new world order with a single centralized government. Then they also need a single centralized currency. So you'd expect to see they're going to push the political aspect, one world government, and they're going to push the financial aspect of one world digital currency that they can control. We're not talking crypto here. Crypto is still relatively free.
Continue with the cryptocurrency, because there she was talking about the Fed coin. And again, the Federal Reserve has to control the Fed coin. It's going to be digital. So they were saying every single individual in America, every citizen is going to have their own digital wallet. But then again, talk about the universal basic income on a monthly stipend is just going to be channeled into that wallet approved by the Fed. So your digital funds will be put in there, and then you can only spend it at the digitally approved outlets, whatever that would be at the supermarkets that would accept the digital Fed coin overseen. And if you don't show whatever at the door, you can't get in. There'll have to be some pre-approval for you to get in. Probably I'm immune to it or something before you can prove you go in. And, continue with your thought there about the digital currency.
The Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, has already been doing research on how to implement a CBDC, they call it, a central bank digital currency. So we might see it in different forms. We might see it, each central bank around the world might implement its own digital currency, and you each have your own digital wallet. There'll be one digital wallet per citizen, and they'll be able to identify you as a citizen. And the digital currency will not be a normal cryptocurrency that's traded in the open market, that's issued and has its own level of sovereignty. This will be a central bank issued digital currency that they control. So not quite cryptocurrency, but using some of the crypto technology. The important point is that it's digital. And why that's important is that they will be able to track every single transaction you make. So part of this whole plan is to eliminate cash. Governments don't like cash because cash gives people a level of autonomy where they can make transactions that the government doesn't know about. I can buy and sell things offline, off their system. They don't know about it. They can't tax it. They don't know quite what I'm up to. But when it's digital, and the technology exists now to do every transaction digitally, you just need some form of mobile app on your phone that links up to your bank, that hooks you into your digital wallet, that's topped up with government-issued digital currency. So call it Fed coin or the new euro, whatever it'll be a digital currency issued by a central bank. And like we were talking about earlier, maybe the government will issue ration supplies. So they'll top up your digital wallet every month. They'll give you an allowance, food and for shelter, and for whatever else they give you the allowance. And in order to keep the people happy, they'll keep topping up that amount with a larger and larger sum each month. So they need people using the digital currency. The only way you can make a digital currency succeed, as we've learned in the crypto world, is through participation. So how does the government force people or coerce people to using a digital currency? Well, you issue it to buy food, for instance. Everybody needs to eat. And if you need to go to that army supply point to buy your rations of food, and you can only pay for it with your government-issued digital currency, well, then they've got you. You're going to switch over to using their currency. And if they say to you, the only way you can pay your taxes is through the government issued digital currency, then you're going to be forced to switch over to using their new currency. So they're going to try to eliminate cash. They're going to try to issue a new digital currency. They're going to have a digital wallet for everyone, and they can watch every single one of your transactions. It will all be recorded on a ledger. There'll be a double entry book system where a merchant has sold you a product and then you've bought it. They'll have both records. They'll be able to reconcile them. And most importantly, they'll be able to tax them. So they'll be able to charge sales tax on all transactions. So swinging out the net to make sure they catch as much possible tax revenues. And they can do that with digital currency. That's why they like it. Two reasons why they want to implement it. Number one is control. They can see everything you're buying and selling, see every single transaction. They can see all the money flows. They control the currency. And second reason, collect more tax.
Sounds like they have to reset it, though, because today's current money wouldn't fit into that diametric.
That's right.
Crash everything to the bottom, reset it, and then start with a new type of digital cash, whatever value that might be. And then sounds like they're trying to implement an entirely new system. But, that goes right in with this grand solar minimum. And I'm not talking about an economic collapse during these times. I'm talking a literal evaporation of all value except for food, metals, medicine, and shelter. And this is just what happens through history. I mean, you look at what happened. Some places were abandoned, 90%. Up in the Scandinavian countries after the modern minimum, people started going back there and say circa 1710, 1715, and they went up places in Sweden and Norway, and those towns had been abandoned 90% because the ships coming in, they couldn't come through to resupply because the sea ice was coming in too early and it stayed much later and it packed in. But before with the currents and warmer ocean flow like we do now, it's not socked in nearly as much. They can still get resupply up there. So even things like real estate and land really had no value. It was all about how to stay alive, how to stay healthy. And there was no money left pretty much at the end of this except through the barter system and gold and silver. And whatever people deemed as value, it was tools, animals, labor. And the currency really got reset a couple of times over just even these last 400 years to the point where it was an evaporation to base point zero and rebuild again. So to use the correct lexicon in there, an evaporation and then a re-emergence would be a better way to put it than a collapse or financial calamity.
Right. They need to destroy any wealth that people hold. And there's a sequence that they would need to follow in order to do that. At first, attack the exchange-traded securities. So things like stocks and shares, bonds, commodities. They need to collapse the value of those. So anyone who held shares, anyone who owned bonds, that wealth is going to be collapsed. It's going to be a controlled demolition. Let's call it that. So there'll be a sequence. And what they want to do is make sure that there are no safe havens that investors can flee to preserve their wealth. So they're going to make sure that the safe havens are attacked as well. So typically gold would be a safe haven. What the big central banks, governments will do is they'll make sure that gold's price never shoots up while they're doing the controlled demolition. They will use their unlimited paper money to sell the futures of gold or of palladium or of silver or of corn or whatever safe haven you might try to flee to. They're going to keep those prices depressed and they're going to collapse it. And all the while, people are desperately looking for cash because they have debts to pay. They have expenses, monthly expenses to pay, to meet. And so people are forced into selling whatever assets they have. So they'll start off selling the more liquid assets, but the government's going to suppress those values. It's going to suppress the prices. So you're not going to get much cash back for that. So you're going to be desperately looking around to say, what can I sell? What has value? How can I get some cash to meet my daily living expenses? And the government will then corral everyone into US dollars. There's nowhere else to go. So you'll be selling your car. You'll even try to sell your house. You need to meet your debt obligations. You need to meet your margin call. You need to survive. And so you need cash. And so with this controlled demolition, the last place that they'll attack and destroy is cash. And we can even see that now that investors are trying to flee to cash. And you read crazy stories like short-term US T-bills are trading at negative yields, which is not supposed to ever happen, but it is happening because people are paying more than the nominal value in order to be cashed up. They need cash. Cash has become king. So what the final step is that the government's going to come along and see, right, who's still left standing and who still has cash, who still has any value or any wealth. And they'll see, right, people have got savings. And they're going to that's going to be their final attacking point, where they're going to force bail-ins, also known as haircuts, where they're going to impose what they call collectivized responsibility. Collectivized responsibility also sounds very communist, but what they're saying is, we're all in this together. We all have to take a bit of a blow, and you savers, you can afford it because you're not using your money right now. So what we're going to do, we're going to give you a haircut. And so anybody who has savings that exceed the national insurance amount, and in the US, you've got the FDIC, came out the other day, it was on the 24th of March, and what was her name? Helena McWilliams. She said, your money is safe at the banks. The last thing you should be doing is pulling your money out of the banks, thinking it's going to be safer somewhere else. That's the clue. They want people to put their last remaining pockets of wealth into their savings account. Banks are what the government is going to attack. They're going to haircut. They're going to destroy people's wealth. Why do they want to do that? Because they don't want any people resisting the coming changes. They don't want people independently wealthy with their own means able to come up with an alternative. They want to force people to adopt the new government system. So there we go. Once they've given people their haircuts and they've bailed everyone in, you've lost your independent wealth. Now you're totally reliant on the government, and you need the government because you need food, and the government's going to be controlling food supply lines, and will also control electricity and water supply, etc.
And how prepared are you for the transition into the grand solar minimum? Are you prepared for emergencies? Our friends at My Patriot Supply do have emergency survival food, the 2-week grab-and-go food crate or the 4-week food supply. They also have water filtration and items that you can use yourself to get ready to pack, such as Mylar bags, oxygen packs, things you can use for your own long-term food storage, and a host of different survival items that you might not have thought about in your preparations. Use the Adapt 2030 link in the description box below. And while you're there, take a look at the selection of heirloom seeds, because you are going to have to grow some of your own food moving forward into the Eddie Grand Solar Minimum. Take back your peace of mind by knowing that you're prepared when others might not be.
And when we've seen that before, especially in Cyprus and Greece, once they bail it in, then they only give you, what was it, 20 euros a day they were giving out in Cyprus. People got 100 grand in the bank, and you're only allowed 20 euro withdrawal out per day. So even if you had the money, it's not like, okay, we're going to hold my money, I can get $500 a day out. No, that's not going to happen. You're going to get $20 a day out. And, by the time they revalue everything, and I'm kind of curious, because you mentioned crypto there. I'm just curious how the crypto market might move forward. And everybody's looking at Bitcoin as a safe haven. You got to wonder where all these things are going to be with Ethereum to make everything run. You got the Bitcoin, you got distributed ledger technologies out here with Ripple, and a lot of financial institutions running on that tech, but not actually XRP.
Right.
Something has to hold value somewhere. And one last thing, Hal, the silver. I was trying to buy some silver last week, and even though the price was $12, good luck trying to find that. Everybody was charging a $5 premium. So in the real world, it decoupled from paper, where even though they had paper, if you had real physical metal, people were willing to pay that, $5 premium. That's, when you're talking about $12 on a $5 premium, that's substantial. Physical metal in your hand, people are willing to pay the extra value to have that physical.
That's exactly right. And that's the proof that they're doing what I'm suggesting. They are using unlimited paper money to suppress the price in the market. If you try and get the real physical from the shops, is much higher. That's the proof that this is a controlled demolition of all assets. The silver will be worth a lot of money in the future, but not now. Any physical gold that you hold will be worth a lot of money in the distant future, but not now. They're going to suppress it through the paper prices, through using futures, through using derivatives. Come back to what you were saying about Bitcoin. Bitcoin would have been a viable safe haven had there not been Bitcoin futures. Had they never had Bitcoin futures, Bitcoin would have been an independent market that they couldn't control. But since they implemented Bitcoin futures, Giancarlo was in charge at the time, And he confessed. He said the reason they allowed the Bitcoin futures to go ahead was that the big financial institutions could then sell the future and they could suppress the price of Bitcoin. They wanted to control the bubble. They didn't want that bubble getting out of hand. So they want to control all asset classes, and they don't want any bubble to seem to be an alternative to the dollar. They want to corral everyone in dollars. And the way they do that is they make sure there's nowhere else to go. You're held captive because the dollar is the only thing that's holding any semblance of value, even though it's being eroded. It's being eroded because we've got debt monetization, we've got the government issuing T-bills, and we've got the Fed buying them directly. That's going to be hyperinflationary in the future, but they're not going to get to that point because they're going to reset the currencies. They're going to switch people over to their new digital currency. That's why we might never get to hyperinflation. We're going to certainly suffer deflation in the near term. Then they're going to come in with their new digital currency, switch everyone over to the new digital currency. We're all going to be reset to zero or near zero. And we never need to worry about the hyperinflation that would have happened to the dollar because of all of the money printing.
I'm wondering what assets might be able to hold any type of value. Understand that gold and silver will go up after the deflationary pressure, but there has to be something that's going to hold some value. So if you're looking out further to try to ride this out with your life raft, that you should be able to find something, asset somewhere that could drop into, because it sounds like there's really nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And unless you're holding metal or crypto, just wait you got to wait it out and then come back in.
You've got to wait it out. You've got to wait it out. Deflation, there's this controlled demolition happening now. They're going to try and force everyone into dollars, some form of cash. That's where you need to be to try and preserve your value. So in a bear market, the winner is the person who loses the least. We're in a bear market. There's going to be a massive sell-off. Now, your physical gold will not be worth much during this sell-off. So that gold, if you can survive this reset, you can hold on to your gold. In the new world, in the new system, your gold will regain its value, yes, and the silver will regain its value. And things that you can use for barter will still be valuable through the whole thing. So a bottle of whiskey or a pocket of potatoes or a bag of rice, that'll always hold value because people need to eat, they need their basic supplies.
I'm wondering if you can get that magical rollover period where you see those gold and silver prices depressing, but you still have a handful of cash where you can try to swap it out, and you got to wonder. I looked through a bunch of dealers last week and online sites trying to work out a couple news stories, and everything was sold out. Call for stock. We'll let you know when it's in. Call for quote. No quotes. No more. Nothing. So, you might have that handful of cash waiting for that magic rollover period of, all right, here we go. Gold's going down. Silver's going down. I still got the cash. I want to try to transfer it. But good luck trying to get your hands on something like that.
Right. So, yes, get yourself into cash for this near term is probably the right position. This is in my opinion. I'm not a financial advisor, but it's something I would seek to do is to try and at least hold some cash. It's going to be the best. It still has utility value. You can still use cash to exchange value, to trade, but you don't need cash. You can do barter. So if you have some form of value, if you have some form of good or asset, you can exchange that, otherwise hold cash. But yes, then there'll come a point where they're going to switch over to the new digital currency, and then they're going to try and compel people to use that new currency. So even in that interval, cash will still be valuable. And I think that's the key point. That's the crux for this society. That's when we as a people need to decide, do we participate in this new digital currency that's being issued by the central banks? Or do we try and return to a monetary system where there's money? Because all this time, we haven't addressed the underlying issue, which is that the financial system is built on fractional reserve, debt-based fiat currency. It's not money, it's fiat. And the reason it's a problem is that the government can print unlimited amounts of it, and they can debase the value of the dollars. And that's why it's bad. Whereas if we had a monetary system, if we were actually using money, government wouldn't be able to do that. You can't print value. That's the problem. You can print cash. You can generate zeros on a ledger, but you can't print value. Just like you used to say, Dave, and you always say, you can't print food. You also can't print value. So we as a society need to decide, when they try and force everyone into their new digital currency, maybe we should ask the question, what about returning to a monetary system where we've got money, sound money that has integrity, that isn't eroded by interest, where money is not loaned with interest. It can't be debased over time. So that's when we need to start talking about what kind of financial system do we want? What kind of monetary system do we want? Because the problem is that all this fiat currency is loaned out with interest, and the interest can never be repaid. It's an inflationary system. It's not sustainable. And so if we had a monetary system, then there's sound money, sound value can never be eroded.
Well, so you're thinking like in today's terms of the world that we know today, but as we march forward and there's only enough food to feed, say, 60% of the global population, and we're getting massive reductions by the billions because there's not enough food to feed people on the planet. Having this whole monetary structure that you're talking about, real value and resetting systems, that's great and fine and dandy. But in a planet where there won't be enough food to feed everybody, and each successive year moving forward into 2028 through 2032 is going to be less and less yields coming out of anywhere across the planet unless you're growing it indoors, vertical agriculture, protected. Maybe that's the deflection and that's the diversion instead of addressing the true problem of not enough food, not CO2, not you, the sun, on a cycle again that's going to reset society. Now, I'll agree with you 1,000% after we go through this, solar reset, that we could start talking about these again. But, moving through this first initial phase here, I think this is the whole catalyst is the reason there's so many vast changes happening is because we've hit that rollover point where these next couple of years, they already know governments of this world are absolutely working together and understanding we are at the end of the cycle, and from every year forward, there just won't be enough food. And we're starting to see it now. That explains away all the. Is it really the virus and people buying a lot of stuff, or was it the actual amount of food disruption that was making its way through the pipeline and had been used up all through last year? Because last year we were using 2018's harvest, and then this year right now we're into the 2019 yields that were coming out that were beyond dismal. The lowest yield somewhere, the most no plant acres ever recorded, and ridiculously low yields. So what was really coming through the pipeline last year? And are these shortages that we're seeing in the store the result of overbuying, or the stores shelves pockets being empty the result of us not playing enough last year, and the pipeline to push that through is not being replenished at a fast enough rate with enough pressure behind it? See, now we're getting into la-la land here because I just don't know which one it is.
Well, there's enough doubt, isn't there, that the government can say which one it is. And
that's a great excuse because nobody can prove it otherwise, huh?
Right. And there'll be such a huge crisis coming that people are not going to have time to look back at this period, piece by piece, figure out what happened, because they're going to be more worried about their own survival. So I'm with you, Dave. I agree. People need to generate some form of independent wealth, some form of independent value. Now, you're on the food side, but we're not going to need just food. We're going to need all sorts of goods. And yes, farmers need to grow stuff. Yes, people need to grow stuff, but we also need to produce things of value that we can exchange, that we can barter. I can swap a bottle of my mead for a couple of bags of your rice. So we each have our own skills, our own speciality.
And that's a deep thought to leave everybody on as we move through the next couple of days and over the weekend, because Hal is busy getting his affairs in order, as myself, trying to get and plant every day and get some things done around my yard and the garden. Moving forward, last thought here for myself, and Hal, I'll let you sign out with the last thought. So my last thought is I watched Mike Adams, the Health Rangers video, and he was saying, use your long-term food storage to get you through this transition period into self-sufficiency, because that's the way we're going. And I think he's seeing something very similar to the reset, seeing something with what I talk about in the Grand Solar Minimum. We're all going to have to be more self-sufficient community-wise. But it was real smart of him to say, grow what you can now, supplement it with what you have with the long-term food storage, but then also get and make that transition into a full self-sufficiency type of existence, because that's where it's going to be at, especially with the supply chain shrinking. It's never going back to normal again. The lives we knew before, that's finished. We're going to enter something new. Things will adjust to it. That's great. But these never-ending abundant things that we used to have until even just a few months ago, it's definitely shift, and it's not going to shift back for years or decades. Closing thought, Hal?
Sure. I think these are difficult times. There's a lot of fear and a lot of panic. But in my opinion, our human spirit will rise up through this all. We will return back to good old values, good old core morals. We will stand together. We'll be patient. We'll be understanding. We'll form strong communities. We're going to emerge out of this better and stronger than before. Yes, these will be trying times. And yes, there's a lot of oppression going on, but don't be overwhelmed by fear or by panic, because we're gonna rise up through this. We're gonna come out stronger at the other end and better off for it.
A better system with less pollution. If you see how few airplanes are in the skies and how that could continue along with less ships and air pollution across the planet, yeah, there's a whole bunch of changes that some of them are good. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I've been talking with Hal. Location unknown. Name unknown, company unknown.
Destination unknown.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks
Good
for your
to chat.
time. Yeah.
And let's get this conversation going. We need people to participate. We need everyone's ideas. We need to be optimistic. We need constructive criticism, and we're going to get through this.
Absolutely agree. Time to thrive. And I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Hope you got something out of the conversation. Please let us know in the comments below what else you would like to have Hal deep dive into in terms of financial information and how the economy is flowing and working in this moment. But anyway, David Dubine signing off.